Hey everybody, Jay Bailey is here. We are live at Venture Atlanta, and we're talking to one of the best in the industry. I had to come and bring you in, right, Dan? This is Jermaine Dupree. Welcome to Atlanta, our official theme song. So welcome to Atlanta. Welcome to the last day of Venture Atlanta. I hope everybody's had an incredible time. We've had lots of amazing speakers, and we certainly are closing out with one of the world's best. We've got Dan Schulman here from PayPal, President and CEO. Dan, how are you, my friend?
Good, Jay. It's so good to see you again. It's been too long.
You know, I was thinking about that. It's been years since we met. And when we did meet, I had this big idea, this place that we wanted to create for Black entrepreneurs.
I remember.
And here we are a couple of years later, and we're real, and we're live, and we're making things happen. So no, I want to get into the conversation. Anybody that knows me or has ever heard me speak two words know that I live and breathe Atlanta. I think that we have an ecosystem unlike any other on the planet when it comes to Black entrepreneurs. As Paul Judge would say, we've got the colleges, the culture, and the corporations. PayPal being one of those corporations that's invested in Atlanta and our ecosystem. So we're going to have a bit of a conversation about that. One of our most prolific entrepreneurs is a woman by the name of Dr. Key Holloman. She's the founder of the Village Microfund. That's one of the, not Village Microfund, but the Village Marketplace. One of the companies that I think you guys should get to know, but she has this saying that's become a rallying cry for the entrepreneurship community. Support is a verb. What are you going to do? And so you've long been a vocal supporter of the importance of investing in Black businesses, financial institutions, certainly serving underrepresented communities with the purpose of closing the racial wealth gap. So we've always had that in common. So tell me a little bit more about what inspired you to take action, and that word is action, and how PayPal is really playing a role here.
Yeah, well, first of all, Jay, it's so good to be here with you. I've been looking forward to it. I was so impressed the first time we met with what your aspirations were, and now they're reality. And I think we can all learn from that as well. I mean, I think words are one thing. My dad always said, it's not what you say, it's what you do. And you're an example of that. And I'm trying to make sure that PayPal is an example of that as well. I don't think it's hard to get inspired to help either the Black community, underrepresented communities. We are all part of one community together. And when you saw all of the social unrest that just bubbled to the surface, always there, but it bubbled to the surface last year after so many tragic killings, maybe punctuated by George Floyd, but so many before that. I felt like we needed to step up and play more than just a small role in trying to address the racial wealth gap, which, as you know, is the same today as it was back in the 1960s at the height of the last civil rights movement. And, I had first thought that what I was going to do was put a couple of $1 million into very well-deserving nonprofits that were addressing some of the fundamental issues of underrepresented communities. And then I started talking to Black employees, Black leaders inside PayPal, and Black leaders across the country, people like Reverend Barber and others. And one of the really interesting things they said to me is they said, Dan, it's great you want to get involved, but we need to be sure that this is a movement in time, not a moment in time. And that's when, we decided to take our commitment from, $2 or $3 million up to $535 million to address what we thought we could play some small role in, at least, which was addressing the racial wealth gap.
And that's a huge number. And I agree with you that it's what you do, and we've got to look at systemic change. And 535 million is a big number and a big commitment. So as we break it down, because there's been so much talk, Dan, there have been so many corporations making these big promises and big announcements. So when we look at the structure of your 535 million, let's dive into like the commitment, how each piece increases access to capital and builds generational wealth, those things that you sought out when you made the announcement. Let's talk about venture funding. We're in venture Atlanta now. So help me understand how venture funding also plays a role in that commitment.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I appreciate your thoughts on the 535 million. I think it still is one of the top 10 commitments that corporate America has made. But at that time, I think it really spurred other CEOs to think about what they could do as well. And the thing I want to stress, Jay, is that we didn't just talk about that 535 million. We've committed all of that 535 million already. And the way that we did that is, remember, when we did this, we were right in the middle of the pandemic.
Right.
And Black-owned small businesses were going out of business at record numbers. 40% of Black-owned small businesses were going out of business versus 22% for the rest of the country.
Correct.
And, there are a ton of reasons for that, but just like access to capital, just some discrimination in policies and other things that I feel are embedded in the system. But we felt we needed to get out help immediately in the form of grants, not loans, but grants to small businesses. And we took $15 million. We worked with another nonprofit, AOE, to help on that. And we gave to about 1,900 or so small businesses that were Black owned. And that was the first thing we did, just grants. By the way, Jay, 91% of them stayed in business. They needed just that amount of small money we gave them to make it over the hump at that moment in time. So I'm really proud of the impact of that 15 million. Then we also gave $5 million to nonprofits. You were one
thank
of those.
You very much. Yes, sir.
Yep. And we knew that every dollar we could do there was going to have a multiplying effect. And so that we did. We put in $15 million into our own selves. And like, how do we improve our diversity and our inclusion efforts? More recruitment, and like make solid commitments in terms of diversity throughout PayPal, working with historically Black colleges and universities, and doing a number of things to help our recruitment efforts and our ability to be more inclusive inside PayPal. And then we set aside about $500 million called an Economic Opportunity Fund, in which we were going to give money there to banks and credit unions that were serving underrepresented communities that needed an infusion into their balance sheets, by the way, that they could leverage to get more money from others. And then we also, very importantly, to the point you made at the very end, we put $100 million into 19 either Black-led or Latinx-led venture firms to invest in entrepreneurs of color. And we felt like if we're going to really address the racial wealth gap, how do we create, generational wealth?
Yes.
And as you well know, and everybody in this conference well knows, the amount of venture funding going to underrepresented is minute. It's maybe 2 to 4% of all venture funding. And we thought, what better way to demonstrate this than to put $100 million into those 19 funds that were led by people of color, investing in people of color. And we are very excited about what we can see there.
I commend you on it, Dan. Not only were we a recipient of your efforts, I know several funds that were recipients of those funds. And so I can see it tangibly on the ground, and I know tangible stories of people that were helped by it.
Jay, I'm curious, like you were a recipient, you've have an amazing track record already, in terms of, you've created more than 2,000 jobs in Atlanta. I know you measure household wealth. Like, just talk to me about what you're doing to build this thriving ecosystem, and maybe a little bit like, how do these investments pay off in the community as well?
I mean, I think the picture right behind you, Dan, is appropriate. With Ali, to your point, when we read the headline, 41% of all Black businesses would cease to exist because of the pandemic. We said no, we rebuked it.
Yeah.
And out of 127 companies, 98% of them survived, endured, and grew during the pandemic.
Amazing.
It's about communities. We've created this safe space for Black businesses to fail and fly. A deep sense of belonging in our space where they have the access, opportunity, and exposure to really reach their goals. I mean, it feels like Symphony Chips, who started doing 20 cases per month out of the back of their trunk. But now if you go in Target stores anywhere, or Walmart or TJ Maxx, what have you, you can find Symphony Chips there. It looks like FS360, another one of our stakeholder companies, who lost $7 million worth of business when the pandemic struck. But because of our relationships with other corporations, they picked up $15 million worth of new business with Fortune 50 companies, the type of thing that takes 6 to 8 years to develop those kind of relationships. We did it in 6 months. It looks like, Brown Toy Box, another one of our stakeholder companies. She's a killer entrepreneur, Terry. And, she's got national distribution in Target. And right now, as we speak, she's doing her product shots in the e-commerce studio that your funds help build at the Russell Center.
Yes.
So she can have professional level shots, to go on her website. Brother, it is happening here in a special way. I think that we are uniquely positioned to create this home for Black entrepreneurs. We're the largest center in the world. We own the dirt. So it's in the community, by the community, for the community. And when I say that, let me be clear that it's not just about excluding others. It's creating that safe space for those that need it most. And more than anything, it becomes a bridge to people like you. And so we'll always be that advocate in the middle, because I believe we lose GDP every year, brother. Because the brilliant ideas that exist in Black and brown minds all over the country never reach the marketplace because they don't believe they belong.
Yeah. I think a stat I saw, Jay, was something like only 4% Black entrepreneurs go beyond the very startup phase versus 20% of others. And to me, that is a place that we can concentrate on, provide not just the funding and the equity, but also the tools.
Yes.
To be able to enable people. And that's kind of like what you're doing. You're doing both. You're enabling a community, tools, processes, people to learn from each other, and the ability to get early equity financing.
And I think on this continuum of engagement, it is not just a 2-day course or a 1-day workshop. It is literally galvanizing the best resources in the world under one roof and creating this continuum of engagement that's rooted in community, culture, and covenant. Wrap it around the world-class curriculum, world-class partners, world-class instructors, where now if a company does go from $500,000 to 2 million in revenue, they need separate, different kind of help. They go from 2 million to 20 million, 20 million to 200 million. Yeah. That's the goal. So there's this circular economy with no waste. And what I'm most proud of at the center, Dan, is that we walk the talk. A lot of the stats that you spewed hurt my feelings, should hurt everybody's feelings. One of the ones is that the Black dollar only circulates 6 hours in our community before it exits. We're going to create an ecosystem within the Russell Center with our stakeholders. That if you drop $1 into that ecosystem, it never leaves. If you need computer work, if you need low voltage, if you need marketing, if you need accounting, if you need legal, if you need finance, it is literally all within that ecosystem. And we're going to show the world a different way forward. Dan, it's on, and we're having a good time doing it, man.
It's amazing, buddy.
Thank you, brother. And so as we talk about corporations and big promises and taking action, it's been about a year since PayPal made the big announcement for your commitment. So tell us a little bit about, from what we've been able to do with some of the funding we've received, what are you hearing now about the progress that has been made? Are there any examples that you have of the impact of the funding that you put out there in the world?
Yeah. As I mentioned to you, we've fully committed, and I've already given out. I think we've given out 510 million of the 535 million, and the 535 is fully committed.
Sure.
And we're doing more than that, of course, as we go forward too, because we're learning a lot. One of the things that my team is really focused on is being very transparent about what we're doing with that 535 million. First of all, I think it's just good governance and good practices, right? If you say you're going to do something, be transparent about it, and then talk about the successes and talk about some of the failures as well. Because hopefully, if we're all really transparent, we can learn from each other. And, you know, a dollar that somebody else puts in can have an even better return than some early dollars that were put in where, you know, we learn things around that. So that transparency is going to be a really important element of what we do and the readout that we have on this. And so, you know, as I mentioned, a couple of things that we've seen already, you know, the first 15 million of grants we put in clearly made a difference because only 9% of those companies didn't make it, whereas the average was 40% before that. You know, one thing that people might not know about PayPal is we are one of the largest providers of working capital to small businesses. We're probably one of the top 5 in the US. And the interesting stats for me, Jay, is that 70% of our loans go to the 10% of counties where 10 or more banks have closed branches. And banks close branches in neighborhoods where the median income is below the national average. I mean, they need a certain amount of deposits for branches to be profitable. I get what's happening there. But then you have predominantly these underrepresented businesses who desperately need capital and can't get it.
Correct.
Here's the thing that I'm most proud of. When those businesses get that working capital, on average, their sales go up by 22% versus a control group that only goes up 1% to 2%. And so to the point you were making before, these are businesses that have legitimate working capital needs to move from one stage to the next. And when they have access to that funding, you can see their sales rise. And when sales rise for small businesses in these communities, there's a ripple effect that goes on. You know, that sole proprietor can hire one more person. They can take care of their family a little bit more, spend a little bit more in the community, as you were mentioning. And to me, these are the things that I wanted to measure, kind of like, what is the velocity of a dollar spent here inside a community? You know, we've clearly, obviously seen, you know, when we have funded like Optus Bank or Hope Credit Union, you know, that they've been able to attract much more capital onto their balance sheets and serve so much more of their communities that are so invested in those banks or credit unions. And so we'll keep reading out on everything we've had, but early on right now, the impact has been far beyond what I expected. And I think what's really encouraging is I'm starting to see more and more corporations start to take an active role in understanding that, you know, a corporation doesn't rest alone. You know what I mean? It's not in a bubble. It's part of the overall community. And if our communities, if any of them are struggling, then you can't maximize the value of a corporation when we know in our country that 70% of all US adults struggle to make ends meet at the end of the month. You know, that's not a recipe for long-term success for any company. And so I think we all need to be involved. We all need to put our money where our mouth is, put our resources and our products into all communities so that we can all rise up together.
And it's important to hear that message from the C-suite, Dan, and that's why I was really looking forward to this conversation. It means something when the CEO of a company stands up and puts his hand on that promise. Do you sense a change in the business community? I mean, you said it earlier about the counsel that you received about this being more than just a moment. Let's make it a movement, and we have the opportunity to do that. So as you look more broadly at your corporate peers and people around the corporate atmosphere, Yes, certainly, because it's convenient, there's a new willingness to engage, but is it on these deep issues? Is there a sincere approach to that? How can other companies and individuals help break that cycle of inequality, create a more equitable future, mimic things like you've done? So talk to me like from your chair.
Yeah.
What are you seeing out there? Because a lot of people that are listening are wondering, is it sincere? Are these people here to stay? Or is it indeed that moment that you talked about? I would love to hear your insight and kind of your view of what you see going on.
I'm a, what do they call it? A realistic optimist, but I'm realistic as well. Look, issues of systemic racism, the racial wealth gap, inequities in our society have been with us for a real long time. We've made some progress, but it's small. It's small. And so I really don't like to declare anything until we really see results and we really see improvements. When we can replicate what you've done in Atlanta to other parts of the country, which I know hopefully someday, you'll be able to go do as well. And this is part of I'm involved in this Southern Communities Initiative. Robert Smith from Vista, Rich Lesser from Bain, and myself are the kind of co-founders of that. We now have 70 companies plus working with us in trying to coordinate all of the commitments that companies made and really go into certain communities and see what works and what doesn't work. Combine our commitments together, kind of some in financial services, some in infrastructure, some in education, and see if you can kind of create this virtuous cycle that feeds on itself. And so I think, clearly I'm seeing other corporations reach out and be a part of initiatives like that. And at the same time, like probably you and others, I'm looking to see what the sustainability of that commitment is. And we had a moment in time where we had civil unrest and it spilled into workforces and across our country. That's receded a little bit. So, but does the commitment recede with that or not? Because the reason we haven't really gotten at this is because it can't just be when there's moments of civil unrest. This has to be a sustained effort over time. This is about being in the fight, not being in the moment. And so, am I seeing it in other leaders? Some clearly, 100%. And others, I think, we'll see what the test of time is.
Surely.
Right? I mean, it kind of makes sense. Like, I don't know, what are you seeing on this? You talk with CEOs and leaders, like what other things should we be doing from your perspective? How do we all come together to really try to make a difference? I mean, what's worked, what hasn't worked?
Surely. I mean, I think that when you start to think about like readiness, access, opportunity, exposure, I've said it lots of time, brother. If PayPal could tell me where the hockey puck is going in your industry, what are the trends? What's the future cast? What's the future of? If you can tell me where that hockey puck is going, we can train the next Wayne Gretzky to score. And as we start looking at corporations and their procurement processes, their supply chain, how can companies be vertically integrated? You're talking about an opportunity for companies to see real scale. Something that we're working on right now. What would be the catalytic impact in Atlanta, Georgia, if we had 7 to 15 companies, all at north of $50 million in revenue with Black CEOs and founders, Black equity partners, that have the capacity to hire 200 to 1,000 people each. When you talk about that ripple effect, that's housing, that's education, that's household wealth. And it's part of our big ideas model in the scale phase, that how do I take a big company like PayPal and match it or stand up a company to solve a big problem that PayPal has with a competent CEO built around a competent team, and you got $150 million problem, and you're going to pay this company $100 million to solve it. That company can go from founding to 100 million in revenue because it had its first customer. And I think the corporate community needs to kind of look outside of its comfort zone, because we know what happens, Dan. I know this guy, we've done business with these guys for 20 years, and radical indifference. And in a lot of cases, it may not be racism. It's just, I don't know you guys. I don't have a relationship with you. I don't see you. I don't know how to connect with you. And we got to build these bridges, because there are huge opportunities and a tremendous amount of brilliance that exists outside of kind of these corporate cultural norms. And I think that access, opportunity, and exposure is something that we can double down on, that will allow this thing to go far beyond just donations and grants and commitments. Now we're talking about systemic, sustainable change. We need more than just symbols of hope. We need institutions that manufacture it. Yeah. And in looking at institutions that manufacture hope, that's the type of thing, Dan, where we plant seeds that will grow trees whose shade we'll never sit under. Mm-hmm. That type of long-term, systemic, generational change, where now these companies feed this next group of college students, and that kid in 6th grade right now knows that if I do everything right, there's an opportunity for me at the end of high school or at the end of college where I can live a dignified life, make some decent money, raise a family, and do the right things. It's more than just Black entrepreneurship and Black business. You build stronger businesses, you build stronger communities, you build stronger individuals. We got a better world. And so when I think about the work that we're doing, it goes far beyond programming. I think programming far too often only focuses on being informative. It's time for us to really focus on being transformative. And I think with corporations being deliberate and intentional about how they open themselves up to new experiences, new companies, new ways of thinking, I think we all win.
Yeah. First of all, philosophically, I couldn't agree more with you, and it's inspiring to hear. Second, just to make a small point and to reinforce a point you made, if I look at the PayPal ventures, we've invested in probably 50 or so different companies. And when we invest, we also have a partnership, right? We invest and we become a customer, and I look at kind of, and we don't invest because of returns. We invest for sensing purposes, et cetera. But our venture company is a top quartile returning because we partner with the companies that we're investing in. And I think that is a really important insight that I think all companies should be thinking about. And the people who are listening to this right now, if you can invest with a strategic, and that strategic can be, customer number 1 or customer 10, whatever it is, but a major one, that really increases the chance of success dramatically.
Almost guarantees it, Dan. Yeah. And I never want to put a guarantee on anything, but if PayPal is my number 1 customer and I'm building a company or infrastructure to solve one of your big problems, it's pretty sure that I'm going to do over 30 million in revenue, my first swing at the bat. Yeah. And even if we're talking about companies that are stood up on the venture side of things, even when we start talking about procurement and supply chain, that readiness component is real. I need you as a corporate partner to help me understand, and your team has been fantastic with it. If they're listening, guys, you guys have been amazing. But if we understood what it means to do business with PayPal, what does a company need to look like? What does their balance sheet need to look like? Their experience, et cetera. If we have the recipe, then we can make sure companies, before they approach PayPal to try to do business with you, are at a point of readiness to do business at the next level. And once they're at that point of readiness, we give them the access to the companies that can help them fly. That part really is one of those symbiotic, mutually beneficial relationship kind of dynamics that we can look at multiple sides on how we make this more than just a moment. Thank you, brother. Thank you. Yep. So I think we're going close on time. And before Allison, before you give me the hook, and I could probably talk to Dan all day about this stuff. So I can fly back out, man. I should be in Oakland sometime soon, I'm sure. Great. But as we look ahead, and you kind of touched on it, brother, let's put it back on the people that are watching. You shared some things about how you think the racial equity and social justice movement will evolve, and certainly touch on that some more. But what do we need to do? Like when we started talking about support as a verb and action, tell us a little bit of how you see this thing evolving. But what do we need to do to sustain the momentum? What can we do individually to really continue to push this thing?
Yeah. Well, I think part of it is all of us as leaders, kind of philosophically, what do we believe in? You know, and what's at the core of our mission? What's at the core of our values? And my view is we need to push on the edges of capitalism itself. We need to think about the constituents we serve much more broadly than what's traditional. This can't just be about maximizing the amount of money we make in the short term. I think that profit and purpose work hand in hand. I think actually, if you want to have any chance of being a great company, moving from a good company to being a great company, being an iconic company, you need to put your employees first. You need to support the communities around you and not just maximize the short-term return to shareholders. Because I think if we do those other things over the medium and the long term, then we maximize the probability of success of our companies. And so I think this mindset of short-term versus long-term, of us all being a part of our communities together, is a really important element. And I think everyone in this room and each of us have an obligation, I think, to push that agenda to, as you said, and I agree with this, and I know it is, maybe people say, oh, it's just like sayings, but we need to try to make our world a better place. And we are leaders, and we have the responsibility to try and make that happen.
As my father-in-law would say, brother, for everything that's been poured into us and for every advantage that we have, we do not have the right to fail.
Yeah.
We could change this world, and people have done it before without firing a single shot. Dan, thank you, brother. The African proverb says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. This should be a testament of how we can go farther together. It's been an honor to spend this time with you, brother.
Yeah, Jay, right back at you.
My man.